Program BA, subject is Psychology. First semester session number 5. The topic is perception. Under perception, we are going to be explain about meaning and characteristic of perceptions. See, you have you had vivid images of hospital and operation states when you were 6 or 7. In retrospect, you may see how far your perception has changed with your age and experience. This is a good example for the significance of your views of perception in your life. Imagine your hospital visit during early babyhood. The early image the hospital is very different from your present image of a hospital. It points out that we modify our views and ideas of perception of things around us according to the changes in the perception system. Let us see how it happens. As we have seen before, the real sensation differs from what we call perception. Sensation are the first stage of receiving stimuli. Perception is something more than sensation. Perception is the intellectual process by which an individual screens, selects, organizes, and interprets in the stimuli in the order to give meaning of their environment. Yes, it is a complex process determined by both physiological and psychological characteristics of organism. See, perception may be defined as a process by which individuals are organized, they interpret their sensation and impression in order to give meaning to their environment. According to Joseph Reed's, perception include all those processes by which an individual receives information about his environment, is seeing, hearing, feeling, tasting, and smelling. The study of this perceptual process shows that their functioning is affected by three classes of variables: the object or events being perceived, the environment in which perception occurs, and individual doing perceiving. Perception refers to the interpretation of sensory data. The sensation involves detecting the presence of a stimulus, whereas perceptions involves understanding what the stimulus means. For example, when we see something, the visual stimulus is the light energy is reflected from the external world and the eye becomes the sensors. This visual images of the external thing becomes perceptions when it is interpreted in a visual context of the brain. Thus, visual perception refers to interpreting the image of the external world projected on the retina of the eye and constructing a model of the three-dimensional world. Perception is very important in understanding the human behavior because every person perceives the world and approaches the life problems differently. Whatever we see or feel is not necessarily the same as it is really is. It is because what we hear is not what is really said, but what we perceive as being said. When we buy something, it is not because it is the best, but because we take it to the best. It is because of perception we can find out why one individual finds a job satisfying while another one may not be satisfied with him. If people behave on the basis of their perceptions, we can predict their behavior and change their circumstance by understanding their present perceptions of the environment. One person may be viewing the facts is one way which may be different from the facts as seen by another viewer. See, here the help of perceptions, the needs of various people can determine because people perception is influenced by their needs. Like the mirror at an amusement park, they distort the world in relation to their tensions. Perception is very important for manager who wants to avoid making errors. when dealing the people humans in the work setting. This problem is made more complicated by the fact that different people perceive the same situation differently. In order to deal with the subordinate effectively, the managers must understand perceptions properly. See, the major characteristic of the perceiver influencing the perceptions are attitude, motive, interest, experience, expectations, and self-concept. See, here as perception is the end of product attaining sensation. All the characteristic of attention are also found perception, some of them are. See here the attitude and aptitude of employees influence perceptions of formation. If they have positive attitude towards the management, they directly perceive the stimuli given by management. In the case of negative attitude, the employees suspect the management approach. Employees of high aptitude have desire and attitude for growth. They behave positively toward management of an organization. Perception shifts as we attend the part of the stimulus we perceive it. When attention passes on one to another part, the perceive that also. Thus, perception shift along with the attentions. This can be demonstrated by double perspective of book figure, and this figure with the two faces of butterfly. See here, the perception is a grouping and combining response. We generally put a number of stimuli together and make a joint and response to example when we can perceive the face and front and number of stimuli from the face such as eyes, ears, nose come to us. We put them all together to understand them as a unit. The motives and desires of employees is cause them to view stimuli is differently as per their level of anger. Helpful motives of the employees will always assist the management if they decide to develop themselves and organization. They will perceive object and situations as a positively. Employees having low motives will not work sincerely. The perception will differ depending on their different types of motives. The interest of individual draws more attention and recognition of stimuli, less attention and recognitions, lower impairs of stimuli. The object and behavior it implies the lack of interest and behavior pattern will be less effective and the perception will weaken. Here, the just attention and perception is a selective is depending upon the subjective and objective factors and the figure has an advantages over background or in perceptions. We attend the things which we have is a better shapes than others. Even if there are gaps in the figure, they will be filled up fundamentally and perceived as a full figure. See, we perceive the object in the terms of reduced cues and reintegration process. A cue is a sign or symbol. As we become the more and more familiar with an object, we perceive it in terms to reduce the cues. That is a part of the total stimulus is insufficient to perceive the object in total. See here, the experience of the employees result in a different level of perception. Young employee takes time to understand the object and situation. Experienced employees generally understand the objects quickly and correctly. However, in contradictory situations, it is very difficult to the correct the age persons. Whereas the young are easily molded towards achieving the objective of the organization. And next characteristic is the expectations distort our perception. People see what they expect to see. If they see the object, the situation differently from their expectations, they get frustrated. They are unable to modify their behavior. The employees may expect more pay, and so they perceive the management from the anger. The real are not properly perceived if expectations exist there. The management has to avoid the expectations for proper perceptions. Here, the perception of the contest, everything that we have perceived will have a contest. Without a contest, we cannot understand anything. with reference to the context of the object looks small or big or bright or dull, or for example the object at a distance appears small and same object nearby appear big. An individual 5 feet tall appears taller at next door, or an individual to 4 feet tall in the same way. We do not understanding anything for sometimes when we enter the cinema, the theater of the middle of the show. Another factor that can affect social perception is the perceiver's self-concept. An individual with a positive self-concept tends to notice positive attributes in another person. In contrast, negative self-concept can lead a perceiver to pick out the negative traits in another person. Is greater understanding of self allows us to have more accurate of perception others. Perception involves time and place. Anything that the perceives not only has a place but also has time. Example, the perceives the time of the event, the place of the event. Perception as movement. The perception not only has the place but also movement. That is why we perceive the movement of the object, for example, moving a car, a train, etc. Perceptual constituency is one another characteristic of the perception. The size, shape, color, and brightness of one object appear to be the same within the certain limits or within the certain distance. Only when it is moved beyond a certain distance of the size, shape appears difference. For example, old uh, rope, 1 rupee coin at a distance, one of the food away from the eyes, your eyes, then gradually move it away from your eye up to a certain distance. The size and the coin appears to be same. Only behind a certain distance of appear is small. These are the reference book we refer for present session. Robert Ferment in the year of 2011 and Hannes Wilker, Richard Atkinson in Rita Atkinson 1975. Some of the information we have taken from the Google.